Not all crowns are worn on thrones. Some are carried in quiet strength and innocent grace. This isn't just about a classroom incident. It's a royal ripple that stunned millions. When a beloved young royal, Princess Charlotte, proudly received an award, no one expected what happened next. In front of a stunned audience, a teacher did the unthinkable and instantly wished they hadn't. What could push someone to tear up a royal child's achievement on live television? Stay with us. This is where duty, dignity, and deep regret collide. A royal moment shattered. It was the morning of June 10th, 2025, inside the Grand Assembly Hall of Hill House School, a prestigious private school tucked in the heart of London. The Union Jack fluttered outside. Parents filled the hall. Teachers lined the front. Golden streamers curled from the ceiling. The occasion? The school's annual Excellence Awards ceremony. A time to celebrate hard work, brilliance, and promise. Princess Charlotte of Wales, now 10 years old, and known for her sharp wit and graceful poise, stood near the center stage in her crisp uniform. Her dark blue blazer was buttoned perfectly, and a modest smile danced on her face. She didn't seem nervous, just proud like any child who had earned something on her own. Then came the moment. Ms. Reynolds, a senior teacher known for her strict rules and stiff manner, took center stage. Her heels echoed sharply on the wooden floor as she approached the podium. In her hand, she held a pale gold certificate embossed with Charlotte's name. The applause had already begun. Cameras from the school's live stream flickered on. The sound of clapping parents softened into silence. With all eyes fixed on her, Ms. Reynolds raised the certificate and turned, deliberately, toward Charlotte. "This," she said, her voice flat, eyes cool, "does not belong to you." Gasps rippled across the room, and before anyone could react, she tore the certificate in half, clean down the middle. The rip of paper echoed louder than any voice in the room. The crowd froze. Mouths hung open. Teachers exchanged stunned glances. A few parents instinctively rose from their seats. Princess Charlotte didn't speak. She didn't even blink. Her hands stayed at her sides, fingers curling gently into small fists. Her eyes dropped only once to the shredded remains of her award lying at her polished shoes, and then lifted again, meeting Ms. Reynolds' stare with quiet, unblinking defiance. Not a single tear rolled down her cheek. No royal outburst, no trembling lip, just silence. And somehow that silence rang louder than any shout ever could. Miss Reynolds shifted her weight, straightening her shoulders as if trying to regain control of a room slipping through her fingers. "There was an error," she said sharply. "We double-checked the results. The real winner has now been verified. This award is for true academic excellence, not sentiment or status." Every word hit like a cold stone. Cameras continued rolling. In the front row, Prince William sat frozen, his jaw locked. Queen Camilla, seated a few rows behind, whispered something to an aide. No one quite knew what to do. No one had expected a scene like this. Not at a school, and certainly not involving a young royal. Whispers began to ripple. Some parents fumbled with their phones. The room felt tense, uncertain, almost surreal. But Charlotte still stood there, still silent, still steady. And in that stillness, something changed. What had started as a ceremony quickly became a moment people would talk about for years. Something far bigger than a certificate was torn that day. And Ms. Reynolds, she was just starting to feel the weight of what she'd done. But here's what no one expected: how Charlotte's silence shifted everything. So what really broke that day? Stay tuned to find out. The day's silence spoke louder. What should have been a proud, joyful moment inside the historic Hill House School in Chelsea turned into something no one could have imagined. The event had been planned for weeks. Banners were hung, Seats were arranged and speeches were rehearsed. Parents, governors, and even a few invited royals filled the brightly lit hall. The school's annual Excellence Awards were always a highlight, but this year, all eyes were on one name: Princess Charlotte of Wales. Minutes earlier, Ms. Reynolds had ripped up Charlotte's award on stage in front of hundreds, claiming a mistake had been made. The words still hung in the air like smoke. "This does not belong to you," she had said, just before tearing the certificate in two. The applause had stopped. So had the smiles. People in the audience exchanged nervous glances. Some whispered under their breath. Others sat frozen, not quite believing what they'd just witnessed. It wasn't just disrespect, it was confusion wrapped in silence. But no one dared to speak. Charlotte, ever composed, stood in the middle of it all. Her chin was lifted slightly, her lips pressed into a quiet line. But if you looked closely, just close enough, you'd notice the smallest detail. Her left hand trembled gently by her side. It wasn't fear. It wasn't panic. It was restraint. From the far side of the stage, a man in a dark tailored suit took an unexpected step forward. He wasn't scheduled to appear yet. He wasn't part of the program, but he paused near the edge of the curtain, his eyes locked on Charlotte and Ms. Reynolds. His posture was sharp, professional. His face was unreadable. Backstage, a production assistant's voice crackled through a headset. "We've got a problem, and it's Princess Charlotte," she whispered, half hunched behind the curtain, her eyes darting between screens and scripts. And then, something unexpected happened. Charlotte bent down, slowly and carefully, as if nothing around her was crumbling. She reached for the two torn halves of her certificate. Her movements were delicate but deliberate. As she stood, she didn't look at Ms. Reynolds. She didn't glance at the cameras. She didn't look toward her father in the audience or the whispering faces in the crowd. She simply folded the paper, softly, gently, once over, and held it in her small hands like it still mattered. The hall murmured. No words came from her mouth, not a single sound. But somehow, that silence echoed louder than any protest. The moment stretched out, heavy with unspoken meaning. Something had shifted. What began as a celebration of excellence had turned into a live, unscripted moment of dignity and quiet power. And while the cameras kept rolling and the whispers spread like wildfire, Princess Charlotte remained where she was, unmoved, undiminished, and the world had just begun to understand what they had witnessed. And then came the moment no one saw coming. Was it defiance or destiny? Stay glued to your screen. A crown, torn and unspoken. Behind the velvet curtains and polished podiums of Hill House School's Grand Assembly Hall, the quiet tension had started to boil. It was still June 10th, 2025. Outside, the sun gleamed off the rooftops of Chelsea. Inside, the air was thick with disbelief. On one backstage monitor, Ms. Reynolds could be seen standing rigidly at the front of the stage, her expression tight with pride. Chin high, shoulders squared, as if convinced she'd done the right thing by tearing Princess Charlotte's award. On another screen, the suited man who had stepped forward earlier was now approaching the side steps. He clutched a black leather folder to his chest. His jaw was tight. He bit his lower lip, as if preparing for something much bigger than an awards ceremony. Meanwhile, Charlotte had stepped aside, not dismissed, but sidelined. She now sat quietly at the edge of the platform, legs crossed at the ankles, hands busy with something others might have tossed aside. But not her. In her lap were the two torn halves of her certificate. She smoothed them with care, pressing out the creases like they were pages from a royal decree. One corner of the paper was missing, and she noticed it too. Without a word, she tucked the torn certificate carefully into the inside pocket of her blazer. To her, it still meant something. She glanced up for a moment, scanning the room, but not really looking at anyone. Her gaze floated past the rows of stunned parents, past the hovering photographers, past even her family. Her expression remained unreadable. No anger, no sadness, just that same quiet strength she had shown all along. 10 seconds passed, then 20. The hall was still hushed, though whispers began to rise like slow smoke. Then, a soft metallic clink broke the stillness. Something small had fallen from Charlotte's pocket, bouncing once on the wooden floor, before coming to rest beside her shoe. Heads in the front row turned. A few students leaned forward. One boy squinted. It was a pin, a delicate silver lapel pin shaped like a laurel wreath. Simple, but unmistakable. A girl in the second row leaned in, eyes wide. "Wait," she whispered to her classmate. "Isn't that from the National Academic Alliance?" It was. The pin, awarded only to students who scored in the top 1% of national evaluations across the UK, was rarely seen outside official competitions. And here it was, lying next to Princess Charlotte's polished shoe, unnoticed by her, but not by anyone else, now watching. Whispers turned into rustling. A murmur passed through the crowd like wind through leaves. The suited man reached the top of the steps, his eyes now focused squarely on Charlotte. A headset crackled backstage as a coordinator rushed to adjust the lighting. But Charlotte remained still, calm, composed. Whatever storm had begun on that stage, she wasn't running from it. She was sitting right in the center of it, quietly holding the torn remains of her award, a symbol of something much greater than anyone in that room yet understood. Then came the moment she held torn truth in her hands. Was it defeat or defiance? Keep watching. When truth stepped on stage. Inside Hill House School's historic assembly hall, the tension was no longer subtle. It sat thick in the air, pressing down on every breath, every blink. It wasn't just nerves anymore, it was the kind of tension that made even the lighting seem heavier. The golden hues from the chandeliers, once comforting and warm, now cast long, uneasy shadows across the polished floor and ornate ceiling. It was as though the room itself had drawn in a breath and refused to exhale. The applause had ended long ago. It hadn't faded naturally. It had been cut short, strangled by disbelief. And in its place sat an uncomfortable stillness, the kind that settles when something important has been disturbed, the kind that lingers when no one knows what to say next. But everyone senses that something significant is about to happen. But to understand what was unfolding on that stage, you had to step back a few days, just a little, back to a quieter, hidden chapter of this story. It didn't begin in front of cameras or beneath chandeliers. It didn't involve fanfare or titles or crowds. Just days earlier, this story had started in a very different place, a plain room in Cambridge. There were no lights, no audience, no royal titles, no applause. It had been a quiet Saturday afternoon. Outside, the wind moved through trees along the cobblestone streets. Inside, the room was filled only with the scratch of pencils, the soft clicking of a stopwatch, and the calm breathing of concentration. No cameras, no royal staff. Just 4 judges were seated at a long oak table, each with a notepad, evaluating the final round of the National Academic Alliance's Elite Math Challenge. Among the students that day was one girl, just another name on the list, except she hadn't used her real name. Princess Charlotte had entered the competition under a pseudonym, Amamira C. Wales, a name chosen to shield her identity, to be judged not by status, but by skill. She sat quietly like the others, her blazer neat, her focus razor sharp. No one knew her face, no one knew her background. And yet, by the end of the day, everyone in that room knew her brilliance. Equations were solved in seconds. Patterns were spotted before others had even begun their calculations. Her answers weren't just correct, they were elegant, thoughtful, fast. And then came the final round. A logic puzzle so complex it had only ever been solved twice in the competition's history. She didn't hesitate. She completed it, blindfolded. Later, one of the judges, a seasoned Oxford mathematics fellow, was overheard saying, almost in disbelief, "She's not just gifted, she's a prodigy, 1 in 10 million." And now, here at Hill House, that same judge, Dr. Raymond Ellis, stepped into the light. The man in the dark suit finally reached the stage. He didn't wait for an introduction. He didn't glance at the host for approval or check the event's schedule. With deliberate steps, he walked straight up the stairs. A black leather folder clutched to his chest like it held something far more powerful than paper. The host of the ceremony blinked in confusion, his mouth half open, unsure whether to continue or step aside. Ms. Reynolds narrowed her eyes, brow creasing. She recognized him, but too late. Her posture faltered. But Princess Charlotte, she didn't look surprised. From her seat on the edge of the platform, she raised her chin ever so slightly, not with arrogance, with recognition. She knew that voice, she knew that walk, and most of all, she knew what was coming. The man reached the center of the stage. He didn't speak loudly. He didn't need to. His voice was steady, calm, measured, but every word struck like a bell in a cathedral, clear, deep, impossible to ignore. "Good afternoon," he said. "I apologize for the interruption, but I believe there's been a mistake." A ripple passed through the audience, a soft rush of air, as if the room had exhaled all at once. Whispers stirred like wind behind heavy velvet curtains. He opened the leather folder slowly, carefully, like someone unsealing a royal document. Inside, he pulled out an embossed letter bearing the seal of the National Academic Alliance. Alongside it, a scanned copy of a test sheet signed only with the initials ACW. Charlotte remained seated. Her expression was unreadable. The torn certificate still rested, folded in her blazer pocket. The silver laurel pin at her feet shimmered faintly beneath the stage lights. And Ms. Reynolds, for the first time that morning, looked unsure. Something was shifting. Something quiet but powerful, the kind of shift that happens before a wave breaks. But Princess Charlotte didn't stand. Not yet. Because she didn't need to. She had already done the hardest part. Now, the truth was walking itself to the surface. So, how did Princess Charlotte stay seated and still command the room? This moment only gets more powerful. The day a princess didn't flinch. What began as a polished ceremony meant to celebrate academic excellence had slowly unraveled into something no script could have predicted. Royal banners still fluttered outside. Cameras stayed locked in place. And inside the hall, the air had thickened into something far heavier than awkward silence. People weren't just confused anymore. They were waiting, watching, bracing. Princess Charlotte sat at the edge of the stage, her blazer neat, her hands still holding the gently folded remains of her torn certificate. Around her, no one moved. Even the lighting crew backstage had stopped adjusting their equipment. It was as though time had paused, just long enough for truth to catch up. And then, finally, it did. The suited man who had climbed the stage steps now stood tall at the microphone. His tone was calm, but carried the weight of authority, the kind that doesn't need to raise its voice. "My name," he began, "is Dr. Raymond Ellis. I'm not here to interrupt. I'm here to correct something." The room turned to stone. Ms. Reynolds, who only moments earlier had torn up Charlotte's award, visibly stiffened. Her mouth parted, then closed again. Her fingers twitched at her side. Dr. Ellis continued without flinching. "Not the mistake you're all thinking of," he said, now holding the black leather folder in front of him, "but one that has to be set right now. A beat of silence. "I'm the executive director of the National Academic Alliance." Gasps rolled through the audience like a sudden gust. Some leaned forward in their chairs. Others exchanged looks of disbelief. Ms. Reynolds stepped forward, her voice quick, nervous. "Sir, this student wasn't on the final list." He held up a hand. "You're absolutely right," he said gently. "She wasn't on the list. That's because her name wasn't part of the crowd. It was at the very top." Silence. Again. Sharp this time. "Out of more than 12,000 students from across the UK," he continued, "Princess Charlotte, registered under the academic name Amamira C. Wales, didn't just qualify, she ranked number 1. Not out of pity, not by vote, by pure performance, by merit, by brilliance." He opened the folder, slow and deliberate. Inside was a new certificate, laminated, embossed, official. The seal of the National Academic Alliance shimmered under the lights. There was no mistaking it. We had planned to announce this achievement next week during our summer summit in Oxford, but after what I just witnessed on this stage, this recognition can't wait. He turned, stepping toward Charlotte. His hands were steady as he extended the certificate with both arms. "Congratulations, Amamira," he said softly. "You earned this, not because of your title, not because someone handed it to you, but because you're brilliant, and no one can take that from you." Charlotte stood slowly. No rush, no drama. Just the poise of someone who had nothing left to prove. She reached out and took the certificate with both hands. "Thank you," she whispered, voice barely audible. Then turning to the crowd, she raised the certificate high above her head. No speech, no tears, no need. Her silence now spoke louder than any royal decree. The cameras didn't move. They didn't have to. The moment held itself. Ms. Reynolds stepped backward. Her face burned red. Her confidence, once cold and sharp, now looked like a mask slipping off. And Charlotte, Princess Charlotte, stepped off the platform, her shoulders straight, her stride calm. She didn't look down. She didn't hurry. She didn't walk away to retreat. She walked away to rise. But what did Princess Charlotte know that made her walk away stronger? Keep watching. This moment isn't over yet. The power they couldn't tear. As the lights dimmed slightly to signal the next segment of the ceremony, Princess Charlotte walked off the stage. Slowly, purposefully. She didn't turn back. She didn't glance at the cameras that still followed her like shadows. She didn't need to. The moment had already spoken for itself. In her arms, held close to her chest like something sacred, was the new certificate. A single sheet of paper, sure, but in that moment, it felt like armor. Proof that truth still had a voice, even when spoken in silence. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. Her face remained calm, the same calm she had worn the entire time. But there was something unmistakable in her eyes now. Not triumph, not pride, but something deeper. Steadiness, strength, grace under pressure. Because the real power that day hadn't come from a podium or a printed award. It didn't come from a judge or a royal name. It came from the one person who said nothing while the world around her gasped, whispered, and shifted. Charlotte had never asked for sympathy, never demanded applause. She had only asked for fairness, and when denied it, she stood anyway. Without raising her voice, without pointing fingers. And that choice, that stillness, spoke louder than anything else in the room. As she moved past the rows of chairs and down the side steps of the stage, the crowd parted. Students who had watched silently just moments before now leaned back to make space, their eyes wide with a mix of awe and understanding. Parents glanced at one another, suddenly aware they had witnessed something far more than a school ceremony. It was dignity in motion, And while Ms. Reynolds remained near the podium, shrinking by the second, trying to gather the shards of her authority, Charlotte walked on, past the lights, past the lenses, past the weight of expectation that had sat on her shoulders since birth. The certificate wasn't the victory, she was. In a world that so often demands noise, she had shown them all what quiet strength really looks like, that you don't need to shout to be heard, that you don't need to prove your worth when you already know it deep inside. Because real power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's the hand that doesn't tremble, the step that doesn't rush, the silence that doesn't fold. And when it lasts, when it endures without breaking, it becomes something unforgettable. As Charlotte exited the main hall, her figure framed by the polished wooden doors, the conversations didn't immediately resume. People stayed seated. Some blinked in disbelief. Others just sat quietly, trying to process what they'd just seen. No headlines could have captured it. No royal biographer could have scripted it. It wasn't just about a girl on a stage. It was about every young person who's ever been told they didn't belong, who's watched something they earned and had it taken away, who's ever had to prove quietly but firmly that they were more than what others believed. And Princess Charlotte, she did that for all of them, without raising a single word, without needing to win the room. Because sometimes real power is soft-spoken, sometimes it's calm, but it is never small, and that's why it endures. So, what do you think truly silenced the room? Her royal title or her quiet strength? We'd like to hear your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more.